let's talk about what this really is, Steve. This is a war on Christianity. The Ukrainian government is attacking Christians. The Ukrainian government is executing priests. Russia is not doing that. They're not attacking Christianity. As a matter of fact, they seem to be protecting it. So that's something else that's clear and obvious to many people that are looking closely at what's going on.
It's Ken Harbaugh with Against All Enemies on the MeidasTouch Network. I just did an episode about Russian propaganda being regurgitated almost verbatim by Republican politicians. That was before this statement, this bold-faced lie from Marjorie Taylor Greene. There is something doubly offensive about this one. Here at the MeidasTouch Network, we have taken on the GOP extremists who lie and say that Europe is not backing the Ukrainians or that U.S. financial support is being wasted. It's important to challenge that kind of misinformation. But Marjorie Taylor Greene accusing the Ukrainians of persecuting Christians when it is the Russian military that has literally tortured Ukrainian religious leaders, that's a whole new level of evil. I don't know what else to call it. I spoke with a former U.S. Army colonel now in Ukraine about this. Sam Hartwell has lived in Kyiv since the Russian invasion and has dedicated himself to supporting the Ukrainian war effort. He has an up-close view of what is actually happening on the ground. Can you talk about some of the lies being spread, the disinformation being amplified by leaders within the Republican Party about where the money is going in Ukraine, about the risks to Americans? Help us dispel some of those myths.
So many fallacies out there. The most egregious one, I think, that I just heard recently is that Ukrainians are persecuting Christians. Oh my God, that's absolutely the opposite. Okay, and I hear that from the likes of J.D. Vance, Rand Paul, that fella Massey, also from Kentucky, Getz and Green and all of them. That is absolutely ridiculous. In Ukraine, 90%, more than 90% of that country believes in God. The latest that I've seen in the United States is that about 50% still believe in God. Ukraine is a country that has Greek Catholic, Ukrainian Orthodox, Jewish, Muslim, Protestant, and Baptist. Okay, there was the Russian Orthodox Church was there, but the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow controlled, is known to be controlled by the FSB, the former KGB. The Kirill, who runs it, is a Soviet Soviet-trained KGB agent. And he, by the way, I don't know if anybody realizes this, but he has just declared the war against Ukraine as a holy war. So who's Christian and who's not Christian? And I say to our American Christians, of which I am one, a Reagan-style Christian. I don't wear it on my sleeve, but by God, if my friends are dying and in desperate need of assistance, I, as a Christian, am obligated to go help. That's what I've been doing for 2 years. And how these folks cannot help and resist that kind of support to their fellow Christians is just beyond me. It's hypocrisy beyond belief. Now, I've been to 2 Easter masses in Ukraine. The first one was right after the war started. That was in their Easter at the time, I think, was in late April of that year. And it was the most religious experience I think I've ever had. I mean, you could feel the presence of a higher power in that Greek Catholic church in Lviv. It was fantastic. So that's rubbish, absolutely rubbish.
It's Ken Harbaugh on the MeidasTouch Network. The film Against All Enemies, which I co-produced with Ben Meiselas and this network, is the #1 documentary on Apple TV, and it's now available on Amazon. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out, and please leave a review. It really does make a huge difference in helping spread the word. Thanks, Midas Mighty. Let's use our power well. you talk to some of the special operations folks cycling to the front and back, what is the human cost of having to defend their country without America's support? And what do they say to you? I mean, I can't imagine how their conversations with an American must go. On one hand, desperate for our support. On the other hand, frustrated that we make promises we don't deliver on.
Yeah, they're averaging, as I was told when I left, about 1,000 amputee patients per month. I've seen these guys, I have photos, I have video, single, double, and triple amputations. And what amazes me about these guys is that they're so resilient, so happy to be alive. Their families are around them. With a guy who didn't even have to join the Army because he had 3 kids. I've seen several of these guys come back as triple amputees. 1,000 of these amputee patients a month. Only 200 can be serviced or treated by the Ukrainian medical system. Another 100 can be taken care of by NGOs and foreign governments outside of Ukraine. But that leaves us 700 a month amputees that are building that have no treatment. And that's expensive technology to do it. Then there's the TBI industry injuries, which are, in my mind, the most important that need to be dealt with right now, because as you know, the TBI wounded, they need treatment right away, or they will remain in a vegetative state and they will not be able to rehabilitate in any way. And they're getting hundreds of these guys a month. They don't have precise figures on that, but I've seen some of the guys. The Russians are using these 500 to 2,500 glide bombs that come from as far as 20 kilometers away, I'm told, and there's nothing you can do against those. And they used 60 of those a day in Avdiivka, one of the last major battles. It never ends. Now, you talk about, and that's the military cost, but on the civilian side, Kharkiv is now being pummeled. It's being evacuated. And those folks, there's already 7 million Ukrainians that had to leave and have sanctuary in Europe. And the Europeans are picking up that cost. That's another big cost that the Europeans are picking up. And so the internally displaced was at about 15 million, and that's moving up to, it's got to be close to 20 million now.
Why do you think that message is falling on deaf ears in the Republican-controlled Congress? Why do they continue to come up with excuses to delay the aid? Why are they tying it to unrelated bills? Is that just a smokescreen to appease Trump, or is there a strategy behind it?
There's no strategy, that's for sure, other than to oppose the side on any that you want to defeat on any basis. They're supporting Trump, the Trump line, and if Trump has his base that will accept anything that he says, so they will make up any excuse necessary to support a Trump line of reasoning.
Thankfully, the attitude of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene does not yet represent the whole of the Republican Party. But that is a real risk, especially when the leader of that party, Donald Trump, has made himself a mouthpiece for Russian propaganda. You all know I have my differences with Republicans in general, but when they stand up and call out Trump's lies on Ukraine, that deserves to be amplified. Here is Trump's own vice president calling out his former boss for his appeasement of Vladimir Putin.
When it comes to this, your former boss, Donald Trump, has said multiple times that he believes he could end the war in Ukraine in just 24 hours. I mean, you were just there on the ground. How unrealistic is that comment?
Well, the only way you could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours would be by giving Vladimir Putin what he wants. And that's the last thing the United States should ever call upon Ukraine to do. Look, I think this war in Ukraine matters to the national interests of the United States for a couple reasons. Chief among them is that by giving Ukraine what they need to fight and repel the Russian invasion, we're going to prevent that Russian military, if they overran Ukraine, from crossing a border where under our NATO agreement, we would have to send our armed forces into harm's way. I think it's important. Just like Ronald Reagan said back in 1985, he said, if you're willing to fight our enemies on your soil, we'll give you the means to fight them there. So our men and women don't have to fight them.
What's most mind-blowing about this sycophantic behavior towards Putin by prominent Republicans is that the GOP used to be the party of national security. I grew up in a diehard Reagan Republican household. To see the party that stood up to the Soviet Union at the height of its power, now acquiescing to Vladimir Putin, a petty, insecure tyrant, almost defies explanation. Until you realize that the Republican Party is itself led by a petty, insecure tyrant. That's the reality of where we now are. We cannot let Donald Trump regain the White House. The freedom of millions around the world depends on us.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.